Welcome back to another video. Do you want to find out how to speak? Hi, so how do we... Hey, do you want to find out how to start I want to talk to you today about how to start conversations with people. Hey everyone, welcome back. Do you want to... How do I start this video? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name's Dr. Qureshi, aka The Mind Doc, and I'm a registered psychiatrist here in the United Kingdom. So, conversation. It gives you a new perspective on life, it enables you to learn, and it's a foundation in creating and maintaining relationships. If you develop the ability to converse effectively, people give you money, they give you opportunities, they give you recognition, and if you think about it, every friend in your life was once a stranger, but then you had your first conversation with them. So we're all social creatures, it's built into us. We crave social interaction, we care about what other people think of us, and we probably spend most of the day thinking about other people. In my job, I regularly communicate with people who suffer with social anxiety. The first thing that I'll say about anxiety is that all the clinical evidence suggests that if an individual faces up to their feared situation voluntarily, so they're not forced into it, they face up to it voluntarily, then they develop over time the ability to overcome this. It's difficult to begin with, but the anxiety subsides over time, and the individual discovers that they're tougher than they thought they were. Like I said, it's not easy though, and that's why I came up with 7 practical tips to start a conversation with anyone, almost anyone. If that sounds interesting, let's get cracking with it. So number 1, let's begin with the obvious. You've got to start speaking. And there's no such thing as the perfect opening line, but it's useful to have some stock phrases that you go to begin a conversation. Some common opening phrases are things like, what's your name? What brought you here? And one of my personal favorites, tell me a little bit about yourself. Hopefully once you muster the courage to begin speaking, the floodgates will open and you'll begin to converse with the individual. Try not to ask about mundane things like the weather, but try and be memorable. Perhaps start with a joke if it's appropriate. So I remember I was on the way to work once and I was listening to the radio, and on the chat show they were talking about the joke of the year, and it went something like this. I had to choose a password 8 characters long, and I picked Snow White and the 7 Dwarves. So I reached work and I told my colleagues about the joke I had heard, and they found it funny. But the conversation snowballed from there, and we'd started talking about what comedy we like, what TV shows we like, and from a relatively easy opening, the conversation progressed. Another point to start on may be an interesting fact, so it may be a hot topic in the news, or it may just be a thought-provoking fact. So if you're on a nighttime taxi ride and you want to start a conversation with the driver, you may tell them about your interest in the universe, and then you may go on to tell them, did you know there's 2 trillion galaxies in the universe, and on average, in each galaxy, there's 100 billion stars. I'm sure you'll all agree that's a really fascinating and intriguing fact. But you just have to be careful if you adopt this tactic not to come across as a know-it-all, so you have to just assess the situation. The second tactic, which is particularly useful if you're anxious and you don't want to speak too much to begin with, is to ask the individual an interesting question. Some potential questions are things like, how did you get into this profession? What's your first memory of the city? What keeps you busy and active outside of your work? This is a really easy and useful technique to get things going. The third conversation starter is pay the individual a unique compliment. So don't give the common boring compliments like you're looking pretty, or you're really cool, or you've got a great smile. Rather, try and think a little bit out of the box. How about, your voice is silkier than Morgan Freeman's?
I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams.
Or, your appearance is always so on point, it's always so impeccable. Or something along the lines of, you know, when you enter the room, it's like everyone just pays attention to you. You command such a presence. I remember I went to the barber's once and we didn't talk much initially, but midway through the haircut he turned to me and he said, your hair is tougher than barbed wire. He said it in an Italian accent, which made it sound way cooler. I remember thinking at the time, and that's such a unique compliment, and it really got the conversation going. Remember, when you're giving a compliment, you need to be sincere and you need to be genuine. And it also shows the individual that you're listening to them, that you're present, that you're observant, and people like that. Tip number 4 is try to establish common ground, because when you do this, you automatically generate the individual's interest because they know that they're similar to you in some way. How about if you're at the party and you see a stranger, you can ask them, how did you meet the host? Because the common denominator is that you both know the host. Or if you see somebody wearing a cool watch, you can tell them you're interested in watches, and you can ask them, where did you get that from? What attracted you towards that particular model of watch? If you see them drinking coffee and you're a fan of it too, you can tell them, oh man, I can't live without coffee either. You end up immediately establishing a connection with the individual, which is one of the ingredients for a successful conversation. Tip number 5 is ask them for their opinion on something. Now, the trick with this is that you don't ask them for their opinion on a complex issue. That would just be intimidating. So you don't ask them something like, do you think Amazon is monopolizing the consumer goods market? Or you don't ask about a controversial issue like the nuclear deterrent or their political views. Ask for generic opinions like, do you prefer tea or coffee? What was the last decent movie that you watched? Things along those lines. Tip number 6 is get their advice or request a favor. This makes them feel valued and important. If you're in an educational setting, you can ask your peer to explain a concept to you that you don't understand. If you know somebody's background or profession, you can get them to give you a relevant piece of advice linked to that. If you're looking for recommendations, you can ask somebody, for example, what is there to keep myself busy in this town? The list goes on. The final tip is know when the time is right to move on. If the individual seems disinterested or preoccupied with something else, then don't take it personally. There could be a million reasons why they're behaving that way. But at the same time, don't devalue your time or words by speaking to somebody who's not going to reciprocate. On the flip side, if the conversation's gone well, then by all means get their number, get their contact details so that you can continue your relationship. Always remember something called the primacy and recency effect, which links to memory. So if you're having a conversation with an individual, they tend to remember the beginning of the conversation and they tend to remember the end of the conversation, and they don't really care as much about the things in the middle. So always try and start and end the conversation on a good note. And remember, it's not always necessarily about what you say, but it's also the way you make the individual feel, which they tend to remember. That's all for this video. Hope you found that interesting. As ever, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thanks.